welcome back to our last segment at EVO 2024. Finals is happening. There's so much energy in this arena right now. We all hopped onto the couch because it was hard to hear each other when we were so far away.
So very
It
far.
is maximum energy here, but we are here to talk about Ekko. I'm joined by two very special people. We have Alex, who is the lead designer on Ekko. Then we have Phil, who is the engineer. And there's a lot of really interesting things that is happening with Ekko as a character in our game that I'm so excited to dive into. So I am going to go ahead and just throw it over to you guys and do a really quick intro, and then let's get into it. So Phil, if you want to give a quick intro.
Yeah, hey, my name is Phil. As was said, I'm the engineer on Ekko. Pretty much did all the implementation with the help and design of Alex here, and excited to be here and talk about this.
We're excited to have you here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Alex. I'm the lead champion designer on 2XKO right now. But at the time that Ekko was originally in development, I was a champion designer. Ekko's the only character that I've sort of kept as my baby, as I've given other characters up to other designers. So I really have such a huge place in my heart for him. I love him so much, and Phil was such a huge part of that alongside many other people. But I'm really glad to have Phil here today because it's a really, I think, unique story about how engineering contributes to to making the game.
So before you guys jump in, let's actually get into a match. I'm gonna be controlling Ekko, and while you guys, I'm gonna just let you kind of take the wheel here, Alex. But as you guys are talking about stuff, I will be adding in some color visuals for you as well.
Thank you so much.
So if you want to just hit the character over there. All right, perfect. Then I'll just get some characters in, and then we'll go off to the races.
We'll both put on Ekko, and
I'm gonna pick my favorite Ekko chroma.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I guess I will ask the same question that we asked with Braum to kick it off, and then I'll tee it over to you. Is, how did the idea of Ekko first come about?
Yeah. So. Like I mentioned earlier, I have been on this project for a long time, and as long as I've been on this project, which is a little while after the Radiant acquisition, we knew Ekko was going to be on the roster. He was one of the very first characters that was identified as just so encapsulating what both makes Runeterra cool and what makes fighting games cool, right? He has this kind of light-hearted confidence. And he has so much style, and he's really unique, right? He has this mechanical identity that one way or another is going to do something cool in a fighting game. And so even from the very early days, when I came in, there were concept art of, Ekko just doing cool moves, or what might a fight look like in this game, and they were really figuring stuff out early on. So we knew he was coming, and indeed even some of the early visual style development was, kind of art of Ekko that ended up alongside other pieces being, part of how we define what the game looks like, and yeah, so he's a really core part of, I think, the identity of 2XKO. So we were just excited once we finally got to start on him. It was when is it going to come, right? And it was years went by before we started, but we finally began. Literally, I said Braum had been in development for a while. Ekko, we started in late 2020. Long journey, and of course we finished him. Or to the extent that a character could ever be finished in a forever game. But we finished him for EVO last year, a year ago, essentially. So it's another, 3.5 years but from conception of what he would be like in gameplay to being ready to show something. It's not working on him all the time. It's back and forth, doing other things, coming back to him. But yeah, long journey. And Phil, you started on it pretty much from the beginning, right?
I did. It's kind of funny talking about the timeline there of how long it took to build him, because the game changed so much during that process. In 2020, right? We did not have a tag game yet, right? It was still 1v1, and Ekko, this was very much an example of the ground was shifting underneath us in our core systems development as we were putting him together, right? And we had to start thinking about that as the rewind mechanics came into place. That was kind of a concern, right? He had all these opportunities for left-right mix when you can start calling in champs that can create that kind of organically just through the core mechanics, and how we, decided to balance that and address those issues as they cropped up, was a challenge, yeah.
For sure, yeah, that we were really on the border of going from 1v1 to 2v2 as Ekko came into existence. It's a very weird transition point.
Yeah, that's one of the really, I mean, earlier in the segment, we were talking about how in game design, it's such an iterative process. And that's one of the scary things about showing things off so early. The first version that was shown, Project L that was shown, is a completely different game now. And it's funny. I'll even, people in chat will meme and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, Project L, we heard about it forever ago," but it's really a completely different game than it was first announced. So that's really exciting. But it's also cool that Ekko has been one of the through lines between that.
He really, in some ways, he really was at the point, he came into existence as this game starts to come into existence, is how I think of it. Like he represents what this game could be in the new form.
So the second question that I had teed up was translating Ekko's kit as we know it in all of the other ways that he's appeared. How was that a challenge? And I imagine specifically between engineering and design, you two must have been in lockstep from the beginning, because I don't understand how this works. Like pressing this and then being able to see, oh, I have the wrong control scheme on. There we go. Being able to see all of the different things, all the different places that you can wind back to is absolutely insane to me. So Alex, if you want to talk about how did that even happen?
It's actually really, I think the development of this mechanic in particular it's a really interesting long-term story from my perspective, that points to what game design can look like. One thing I think I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this, but basically in the very early days, do you remember I did this exploration? We had some ideas of what the goals were for Ekko, what we want to achieve with him, right? He should feel like a time traveler. He should feel like a punk genius. He should be scrappy, and brave and actually fight up close. We had all these kind of goals for him, and then I did this bad, chaotic brainstorm of 10 possible entire kits of what Ekko could be. I didn't make the whole kits; they were one paragraph each. Right, but they were here are all these different directions we could go with this incredibly inspiring character based on League, based on what's in the IP, and they were totally different takes on the character. There was one, for example, that was it was this is an Ekko who's been through this fight before, and all his mechanics are around automatically dodging your attacks because he knows what you're going to do. It's a completely different conception of what he would be in gameplay, and we evaluated all of these against the goals that we had set out, and it seemed like this idea of kind of taking inspiration from his ult in League and turning it into his specials here, so he can really, really work with going back to old versions of himself all the time. It seemed like this hit the goals the best, but that was the last of these 10 ideas that I came up with. And so we talked about this, but the crazy thing, and we can say this now, that for folks who didn't see, yesterday in Tom and Sean's segment, we talked about what the story was with Katarina, right? How Katarina was, we weren't really building her necessarily as a champ to ship. She was kind of the place to develop the core rules of the game and to figure out what the game could be. And she served this purpose kind of almost one last time through Ekko, where I built an initial prototype of this idea of being able to rewind, do an attack and then rewind to an old version of it on Cat, on a version of Cat with a move, where she kind of moves forward and strikes basically. And it was so jank. It did not work. It would work half of the times you tried it. It had bugs in 20 different ways, but it was enough to show it to people and be this is what I'm talking about, because it's hard to explain. What do y'all think? Could we do this? And then from that point on, it was Phil who made this thing actually make sense. Not just in terms of building it, but so many of the details of how it would actually work really came from you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for putting together that prototype, though, because I also felt once you showed that off, you'd come up with this menu, right, of all these different ideas and different directions we could take Ekko. But as soon as I saw that prototype, I immediately saw this potential for clever play, tricking your opponent, being on one side, rewinding to the other. It just I got super excited because those are the kinds of characters that I like to play.
Yeah. Congrats on the Venom announcement.
Oh yeah, thanks. We'll see. But yeah, I am excited. Venom main, I do love Venom. That'll come into play a little later. But and getting to at that point I latched onto that implementation and just kind of ran with it. And we turned it into something that we could have apply anywhere to any attack. And like we knew that we were going to need to play with all these variables of like how long does this clone last in time, when does it expire, like how fast does it follow Ekko, and then even early on we had this conception of giving him an install alt that, or super in this case, like his downtown S2 he has it today, where this thing will just follow him indefinitely, and I baked that into the initial implementation. I was so excited by that idea and wanted to explore that at some point. So I tried to take what you had and make it like flexible so we could play with it and find the right balance. And I think that ended up being pretty useful as we like made progress. And
there were so many times we had to like tweak all of these core variables for how his his clones work, just to make his gameplay make sense. And because you built this beast of this flexible system, we could just do that. I want to like jump ahead in the history a little bit because it came up, his S2 Super. I just want to say like this S2 Super is such a testament to the collaboration. Phil, we talked about this for a long time. We knew this was a super that we wanted for him. But he did not have this super. He was working a game without the super for what, 2 years or something?
Yeah.
Because we knew it was going to be such a pain to build, and we knew it was going to be really hard to design, to tune right so that it'd be useful and understandable. And Phil, had built this flexible system that would let us do this stuff. But part of me wondered if we'd ever do it, if we'd have time, because it was so hard. But this is like, again, the importance of good collaboration. Phil believed in this character so much and believed in this super so much that he was like, no. Like, I would say, it's okay, we don't have to do it, we'll find something else. He's like, no, I believe in this thing, we're gonna make it work. And he grinded and he put his soul into it and he made this incredible super that's just, I feel like, really different than anything about the fighting games and really fun to play with and kind of represents the peak of Ekko's potential mastery. So thank you so much.
No, of course, thanks for indulging me in my crazy ideas. But like, even as we started like exploring it, right, like, there were still all these unanswered questions. Like we knew in the abstract we wanted an install ult that would look closer to his ult in League, right? That would give him like this more persistent clone that follows him through time. But that's kind of all we knew, right? And there were still all these unanswered questions as we developed it. Like, and initially, we were tracking like all of the state that Ekko had in game.
Right.
So like you could rewind to any moment in time, and it would actually continue that action with every single piece of state. So you could throw a time winder with S1, and if you timed your rewind right to that moment where you threw the time winder, you could throw another one.
You would just automatically be in the process of throwing another time winder.
Yeah. So that was actually the first iteration of that was what we had, or like there were some even fun bugs where like you jump, and then if you rewind to a jump, it would like continue the jump momentum, so you would actually go really high.
What do we call that? Like, we had some name for like Ekko floating up into infinity. Would have so many bugs would lead to Ekko floating into the sky.
Yeah, with eventually, that iteration ended up feeling really unpredictable though, because you would rewind and get these unintended consequences. And
you'd be like in the middle of the active frames of a normal or something, and you'd hit meaty just because you rewound to the meaty frame, and no one had any idea what was going on.
Yeah, so we knew pretty like quickly after that, like, okay, this isn't quite going to work. And I think you were the one who suggested, like, look, we already have this notion of these empowered clones where he's instantly actionable. Like, let's just do that, and that felt right. And still gives him all these like really cool tools. And
so you mentioned kind of like a bug before. Were there any like really just weird time-related bugs in development that were just like, what in the world happened here? Like any funny ones that you're willing to share with people?
I mean, my favorite are the ones where he just kind of flies off into space. There was one even with when he throws, jumping S1, right? Like you'll notice. There's that he kind of, his momentum stalls. So we had some bugs where if you timed it perfectly while falling, the momentum vectors wouldn't quite resolve correctly, and he'd fly off into space.
Phil had this like video that he made for our internal show and tells, where we go, hey, here's what we're working on right now. Phil makes these amazing videos for them, and he just was like popping up different work that he had done on Ekko in about a 1-minute video over the course of the month. But in the background, he was playing like I Want to Get Away with Ekko just like repeatedly doing air charge S2, going higher and higher and higher for an entire minute.
Yeah, you could rewind and then immediately jump S2 again, like and into itself, and he would gain a little bit of height each time. So you could just like kind of fly.
People would
it
do
just
this in
be-
game. It was
yeah,
very
yeah.
time. We were like, yes, we'll fix that eventually. Sometimes it takes a very long time to fix things. There's a lot going on.
When Marlon Pye joined the team, he actually started incorporating that into the play,
Oh
and
my
that was when we
God.
knew like we had to fix that. But
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So one of the things that I'm curious about too is, as you are doing this, like there's another huge factor into this. When you're rewinding back into time, Ekko looks so smooth. How do you animate this? Like, well, like what? I feel like that is like the big third piece within this, like, you know, this trifecta of the core of Ekko.
Yeah. One of the, you know, as a character comes online, as we go through the development, different disciplines kind of come in and out of, you know, active involvement, right? Starting out, like a designer might not even be involved, right? Except maybe just sketching things out at the highest level. There might be, you know, maybe designer and narrative and, you know, one artist are talking about what it's going to be, but then narrative is going into more detail. A concept artist is sketching out what the character might look like. They're making an early model. But then one thing that happens, once we have a model we can work with and it's rigged up with a skeleton, and we know roughly what we're going to try, we often form as kind of like the first stage of development of the actual playable character. We form this, like you said, this trifecta of a designer, an engineer, and an animator. Sometimes we have a VFX artist in that early crew. Sometimes we have like someone from GAT, from a game analysis team. But at this point, it was me, Phil, and our animator Yoon Kwan, who did such an amazing job on Ekko. And it really was all three of us like talking every day about his potential and, you know, what things could be, and everybody using their own sort of mindset and creative abilities to inform what's possible. And you could just look at some of the amazing expressive stuff Yoon did on him, and a lot of this ended up impacting gameplay. Right? Yoon would be like try his run heavy. You know, people love this thing so much, and oh yeah, I know the buttons are messed up. That's the one. Right? Look at that. And you know, if I recall, like we know we wanted to run heavy, and maybe we wanted him to be airborne, but a lot of the gameplay of this came from Yoon realizing like this is what it should look like for him to get airborne, right? Him stepping up the opponent, and then we built around that, right? Because like, you're right, this is too cool. We're gonna make it work. Like the good ideas come from all over the place, and in the early days, it really is the three of us just like jamming. Yeah, I mean, God, his air charge S2, that thing, he was like, we really wanted it to do a big, if you can, it's a, okay, wait, let me just show actually real quick. Can you hold this for me?
Let the master hop
Yeah,
on.
so basically, so if you do it from like a regular clone, rewind here, not working. Oh, okay, here, let's do this. Notice that last hit, he flips up in the air. That was like in the late days, right? In the late days, we really wanted to refine Ekko's gameplay and make sure that wherever you saw something really cool, that where you're like, oh, I should be able to do this, like, yeah, like, let me do it. Like, make sure that, you know, all the different fantasies of using these Lego bricks together can actually work. And so one of these fantasies that I kept thinking about was like, oh, I want to be able to, you know, I want to be able to do one of these charge clones and then instantly rewind to it and keep comboing, you know? And so like, so that you can just land, but we also wanted to be able to, basically like, let's see. Anyway, having some input problems on here, but the idea is you can rewind mid-air, go into an air heavy, and you need enough hit stun for him to actually go right back up to that spot and hit them with another button. And so Yoon was like, okay, this has to be a multi-hit attack because that's the only way we're naturally going to make it look
work.
like he's spinning. We can't just do one hit. He has to be kind of like drilling through the opponent there. And so that ends up defining so much of what this move does, right? We're like, okay, how do we think about hit stun? How do we think about advantage given the fact this is this drill move? It was never part of the plan, but it's necessary for creating the fantasy that we want, making all consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. One of my favorite moves too is his take a break. Let me see if I can. It looks so good. It looks so good. But one of the things too, I feel like, is his time winder. How did you guys land on that design of the time winder? Because it really feels like time. I mean, like he's the boy who shattered time, right? It's the through line between his entire kit, like hitting the edge of the time winder. I don't know if I can do it. being able to freeze him, like, how did you guys land on that as a mechanic, and how did you make it happen, like, in the back end?
What I am remembering is that like we kind of wrestled with, you know, in League, right? The effect is much larger, right? And I think I don't remember if we ended up prototyping that or if like I think you should probably speak to this but I do remember we played with that idea.
Yeah, like Time Winder was a weird one because, you know, I think his Time Winder in League is a really iconic move. It's one of these boomerang projectiles, right? It goes out, it comes back, and it slows the victim. But there were a couple considerations here. One was like, there are a lot of boomerang projectiles in League, and as much as that's a big part of the fantasy, we were like, we don't want that happening all over the place in our game, right? And so we ended up putting that on his super, but we used this idea of like, okay, we don't want to be slowing opponents that often, actually. As much as slowing opponents is something you expect with Ekko, we find that to be like something you really, really have to earn in a fighting game, because it actually feels pretty bad to not have normal control over your character, right? And so we're like, okay, actually putting the opponent in a hit reaction and slowing them feels better than giving them agency while they're slowed. It's kind of this ironic thing. Taking away even partial agency feels better than leaving partial agency. And so that was how we ended up landing this idea of like, get the slow mechanic by getting, oh, you're going for it, good. Yeah. By getting the perfect range, the Gotham, sweet spot, Time Winder. You still get that idea of feeling like you're slowing down your opponent, but in the end, it ends up being like more like a dizzy state or something like that. And then in terms of actually implementing it, I feel like it wasn't too. We definitely had some bugs around.
Well, that and Ekko was actually, I think, the first instance we had where we needed an animated projectile. So we actually ended up building an entirely new projectile system just for Time Winder, which yeah was some work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of the projectiles in the game now kind of built out of some of the tools here, where you can see like you built. Yeah, like I guess the initial version of the projectile system, right? In which all, right, like projectiles are almost like mini characters in our game. Mm-hmm. They're able to queue up animations, and they have different scripts for different things they can be doing, and they can kind of has its own internal logic because they're so diverse in the ways we want to be able to express what a projectile can do. It's a very important part of a game like this.
Yeah. I think my contribution to Time Winder was probably the this right here.
Oh my God, yes.
So like you know, Alex mentioned earlier, I'm a Venom main. It was so painful for me to throw out a projectile that had like time, you know, it hangs around, right, when you throw it, and then to not be able to interact with it further, to me, felt criminal. Like, right. I really wanted to be able to hit it and do some stuff with it, and yeah, thanks for indulging me on that, because like, now every single one of Ekko's heavies can interact with Time Winder, and any Ekko can hit any Time Winder, which makes the mirror a little more interesting.
We could try the Ekko ball here, yeah, we could try it. No. Challenging. But yeah, we had, one of Ekko's moves in League, he tosses up something, an object, kind of like his Time Winder, and he bats it at the opponent. It's actually a clone that bats it. But, so we knew we wanted something like that. And one thing I love doing when adapting a character from League into our game is to kind of rethink a thematic from League, like, hey, this moment from a given move, and be like, what if that wasn't a move? What if that's kind of like an emergent experience the player has by combining multiple moves together? And Ekko does this multiple times, right? So you get this moment from his W by first doing crouch S1 and then batting it. And, similarly, like his phase dive, when you do forward S2, down forward S2, down S2 now, and then rewind, that's kind of like what happens in his phase dive. But in this case, yeah, we just had that one launch. We had crouch S1, and then only his launcher could launch it. And a bunch of people on the team really wanted more flexibility, and Phil most of all. We were worried about it becoming too kind of like heavyweight a part of his game. Like all you're doing is throwing up Time Winders and hitting them away, and he becomes this crazy zoner character. But again, sometimes those worries, you can get away with them just through iteration, right? You just do a lot of tuning, and you make sure that we really thought a lot about each of the paths when you hit the Time Winders, so that none of them covered too much space, none of them were too efficient in terms of frame advantage. Each of them had their own specific use case, so that Ekko doesn't want to just throw them out there and bat them, but he actually wants to go in.
Yeah, I think even his charge jumping H will kind of send it behind him, which I'm not sure like practically it has too much use, but
But it's one of those, like, if someone ever uses that in a match, right, it's going to be the most amazing thing.
This is one of those things too, where it's like I don't anticipate this to like come up a ton in high-level play, but it's one of those things. It's fun to play with.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way to put it.
Like shout outs to Apology Man and Brian F on our Red Bull stream last year, who like showed off Time Winder tennis and tried to see how long they could get this back and forth going of batting Time Winders, and I don't know, it's just like a little fun mini game, right? That Ekko gets. And,
absolutely, and people get really surprised when they realize you can bat the Mega Time Winder as well.
Yes, yeah. So you can do that with a super.
I really like what you said about it just being fun to play with. Like, I think a really good principle of game design is like often you want to build the toy first. A toy is like a game without goals or rules, right? A toy is just something that's fun to interact with, that you want to put your hands on and manipulate, And so when you have a good toy, when you have a character that's fun to move with and fun to hit buttons with, that's a great starting point for making something that's actually interesting and deep and has good gameplay.
It is a game.
It is a game.
Yeah, so people in chat were asking to see Ekko's taunts, so I was throwing it out there, but I just want to appreciate this so they can actually hear it on stream. I love all the voiceover lines for it.
Yeah. I love these taunts so much. And by the way, you can trigger taunts just by holding a direction during round start. That's a new thing. Good to know when you're messing around at home in Alpha Lab.
Yeah, it's super cool, and I believe you can hit the R3 button, or I'm not sure what it is on keyboard, but in the round start as well to get a taunt out
I think
there.
even just a direction will do
That's
it.
one of the hidden Easter eggs I haven't seen people pick up on yet.
Pre-round taunt, exactly.
One thing that I'd really love to show is his ultimates, the 2 different versions of it. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Here,
let's do it. I guess let's do the base version first.
Yeah. Let's do the base version first. Here, I'll let you do the inputs.
Okay. Easy. It's easy. See, it's just so we're kind of trying to play with, multiple pieces of his kit here. And this was a collaboration with Yoon, the animator, and with John Lamb, our concept artist, kind of figuring out what this would be. A bunch of people contribute to these. And now if you just jump and then hit a button, we'll do that.
Yeah, I'll do a jump heavy.
Great. Okay. I want you a grounded heavy. Jump and then do a grounded heavy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a shout out to Ekko's launch cinematic, Seconds, which was basically the way they showed the character early on. Kind of over and over again, he's fighting this one enemy, rewinding time over and over as he gets beat down to find a way to finally defeat him. And it's a really awesome cinematic, and we wanted to capture some of those moments in the game. You actually get hit by your opponent, and then you get right back up again and you try it again. Now you know how to defeat them, and that's able to dodge their attack. It's a little abstract, but I really enjoy it. We had some difficulties implementing it, didn't we?
I think it's just there are a lot of edge cases in gameplay with this particular pattern. Because originally we discussed doing just a counter, but then we thought that was maybe too advanced to use, fun at all levels of play, right? If I'm just starting out in fighting games and I do down S1 S2 and I expect something cool to happen, but I'm just in a pose for a counter, that's not very exciting, right?
Exactly.
So it's a strike and a counter. But you're right, it's a kind of a weird mix, and we ended up in situations, right, where it's you ended up countering something that's invulnerable, and then Ekko would kind of rewind, come back, and then try and swing, but they'd be in this invulnerable state, and we had
2 Ekkos just
yeah. So, and speaking of fun bugs, we actually at one point had you could get an infinite loop with two Ekkos, doing the counters on each other back and forth forever. But yeah, so there were a lot of edge cases to iron out as we kind of put this thing together. But I think we're in a pretty good spot at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll say is I think and peek into another aspect of the development is some of these edge cases are still a bit of a problem. You'll definitely see cases where Ekko made the call out, he used it as a counter, and then because his opponent hit him really high up or something, he passes under them and this huge attack, but he still whiffs it, right? And we've talked a lot about do we want that? Is that a form of mastery, or does that feel so random that we'd like to improve it? And so I can definitely see a world potentially where we end up trying to make this a little more reliable when you use it as a counter, right? A little more I got the counter, I get paid,
Yeah. So one of the most exciting moments is when you call, like, say someone does a wake-up ultimate, and you call their wake-up ultimate with yours as Ekko,
Yeah.
and then you send them back into the grave with his ultimate.
Like, you didn't have to, but it feels good.
But one of the, like, interesting, like you said, like, those interactions is with Yasuo, like, when I'm playing Yasuo against Ekko, I know that if I do my ultimate, even if he calls it, you get so much upward mobility on it that you're going to be safe on it.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, like, I know when I'm playing Yasuo, I'm like, I know that I can gamble this, and it's going to not be as risky as if I was, say, on, like Darius or something.
Right.
So that's also a really interesting layer of it.
Yeah,
you know?
it's a really hard decision, right? Exactly. Every time you make something more consistent, you give up certain kinds of depth. And for us, it's about finding, like, where are the right kinds of depth, right? Where are the things that are fun to learn and master versus, like, it's going to be such a pain to learn this and not really that exciting, you know? It's always a question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes there's an expectation to maybe come out and be like, it's going to be this way. But I really feel like the entire team has been approaching it in a way of like, we're going to put it out there and we're going to see.
Yeah.
We're going to let it marinate. We're going to see what people say. And then we're going to, you know, make a decision. Then we're also open to being like, maybe that decision is the first decision of many.
Right.
And that's what I really love about being a part of this team is that we're constantly iterating and growing. So
I think, you know, we talk a lot about how much we care about listening to player feedback, but there's a funny flip side to that, which is how much self-restraint it takes to be patient. You're right? Because everyone on the team is a perfectionist, right? Everybody wants to make the best thing imaginable. And sometimes, you know, we're like, okay, I gotta fix this thing. But we're like, do we really know that that's the right choice? Like, we have a lot of great information, but we know that putting it in players' hands is gonna give us even clearer insight, right? Y'all are gonna know better. You're gonna show us what's real, what's good. And so sometimes we'll hold off on a change because we just want to wait to see, like, okay, this thing's cool. We want to put this extra polish on, but what if that's taking it the wrong direction? And then we finally learn from people like, oh, damn, like, we're so glad we waited, you know, because people are actually really loving what's there already. You know?
Actually, like, one example of that I really, really like, we were talking about not too long ago, was, you know, for the longest time, when the initial version of Ekko's S2s kind of fell into place, the clones did not last as long. So they really felt more like Rekkas. Like, you didn't have much time to rewind and do the follow-up. And you know, one of the adjustments you made, right, was to extend the lifetime of the clones, right?
Yeah.
When now you could finally, like, create more space, reposition, get behind your opponent, put them between you and the clone, create more ambiguity, right? And that was a lot more exciting. Ekko became a lot scarier, right? But then there was this other problem where now the clone's all the way over there. Like,
right.
if you and your opponent end up really far away from the clone, you can't hit S2 again without just rewinding. You could, like, you know, start landing a conversion, and you're comboing your opponent, and you suddenly can't use S2 anymore because you're just going to rewind back to a position and drop your combo.
Yeah.
And this was an issue for a long time, and we didn't have a chance to, like, revisit this until we started working on the install super, because that like really highlighted the problem. Because, like, you're in this install state, right? Let's say you're doing a combo, and if every time you hit S2 you just rewind, like, you're just, like, completely limiting Ekko's kit, right? And it doesn't feel like the payoff is worth it. Why would you spend a meter to basically delete a button on your you know, stick, your
Right.
controller? And yeah, if you want to talk about your solution there, like
Yeah, well, I mean, there were actually, like, multiple solutions here at once.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really interesting time because, again, Ekko kind of, like, was frozen in time for a while. We finished a version of him, and then we were playing him internally for literal years. And during this time, both Phil and our designer Ed Ma were talking a bunch about, like this is awesome, I love it, but I know we can go further. Like, this character is supposed to feel like a genius, right? And it's like, my options aren't wide enough to feel like a genius. And, like, how do we give him that expressiveness? And so, before EVO last year, this is an example of where we didn't wait to make the changes until feedback, because we were convinced we can make it better. We know it's going to make it better for people, right? It's always finding that balance. But we did a bunch of things, like, here, if you can put the mic here, I'll talk and show a few things. So the big thing that Phil is talking about here is, it used to be, you know, you're here, and now I'm fighting you, but, like, my clone is way back there. I can't use my S2, and you're far away. But now, right, if I want to, I can hold forward, and I can do another one, make it a new clone, right? And that optionality is super important. We knew we wanted something like that, but actually just figuring out the very simple input that would do that wouldn't confuse people and would let us do everything we wanted, took a while. And then similarly, we were like, okay, if the clone's back here, can we give you ways to get back to your clone, right? Right, this move didn't used to cross up. it was 1, 2, 3 hits, all moving forward. And through a lot of like, okay, how can we get Ekko on the other side to sandwich with his clone? We're like, oh, this is an opportunity too that opens up some cool stuff, right? It's fun in general as a simple knowledge check, but it also becomes a mind game, right? Where I might do this, right? That's just the simple version, but if I want to, I can do an early rewind so you don't block the wrong way, right? So we're trying to find a way to get the pieces to work together. Similarly, we added this, right? And that lets you, lets you do cool stuff like get you back to the clone. But if I time that right, you can actually get a combo there or a mix-up there. But it's like, it's pretty sensitive. Yeah, see that? Okay, so that was the mixed version. But if I'd rolled there, yeah. But it's hard. And then there's even this, right? This charge us too. This is another way to sandwich with a strong clone. So we're doing all these little things that didn't used to pass through. And when we said we wanted to pass through, our animator Yoon was like, it has to roll. He has to pass through. That's what's going to look cool. And he's right. It made it so much more satisfied. So kind of all these pieces fitting together to just give Ekko that much more flexibility and power. And now he's like this oaky monster, and you have so many different ways to manipulate him. Yeah, is there anything I'm missing in terms of ways we change that?
Oh, no, that's perfect. I think, yeah, those are all the examples I could think of, and that was exactly like, I don't know, that was the fantasy I had in my head. Like, the moment I saw your prototype was like, there's so much potential for just silly mix here. And I was just, yeah, and I think we've gotten there, and it's really cool and really fun, and Ekko's a blast to play. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things too that just from playing Ekko a little bit that I noticed that maybe I haven't heard or seen too many people discover as well is that for a lot of the assists, there's 2 different assists, right? And when you hold Ekko's back assist, he tosses it.
Yeah.
Once I discovered that, I was like, oh my gosh, we're cooking now. Here, let me see if I can do this really quick.
Here, I can just do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's the basic back assist. Oh, yes, thanks. There's the basic back assist. And now here's the charge version, right? And the crazy thing about that is you can do this, right? Right? And so you even get angles there that aren't possible because of the height that it's at the time. And so it ends up just like really disrupting your idea of what Ekko's going to do when he's in back, right? That's what we want to show, right? Yeah.
No, exactly. And then also just like, seriously, huge shout out for making this work under the hood, because I have seen like crazy bugs that have come in games, and seeing how this has come out so well, I am constantly impressed by your skills. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It was a lot of fun. I have so much fun to work on.
That's what I was trying to show earlier.
Yeah, there's some really fun Ekko combos. It's just like, earlier we had Box and Emily Wang on stream with Marlon Pai, the designer of Yasuo, and I think afterward I just saw Box sitting there like, his mind was expanding. And that's exactly how I feel after playing Ekko. I've had my hands on Ekko for a little bit since I joined the team now, but even here sitting down with you, I didn't even realize with the charge heavy in the air knocking it back to the clone. I was like, there's still so many little things, little Easter eggs to discover in his kit that are super exciting. So yes. I love it.
Shoutouts to the team for just like continuing on this character for so long and just like giving us the space and the inspiration to just keep improving it and getting it to the point where we can feel really proud of it, right? And hopefully we want players playing this character for like maybe decades, right? It's like, yes, and we'll improve it and stuff, but the bones of it have to be cool. The bones of it have to have that potential.
Cool, so the last question that I had for you guys, and I'm gonna let you mull this over a little bit, and I think you might have touched on it, but what was the most surprising thing about Ekko? Was there anything that you went into Ekko really thinking that you knew about this character, and then once you started working on it, you're like, oh wait, maybe we were off base on that. Maybe it's actually this.
I think like one thing that came up for me, like this kind of kit, right? It's like fairly complex. There's a lot you can do. And we were concerned for a while, like, is this going to be right for newer players? And I think we were delightfully surprised as this thing started to come together that some of the new people, not everyone on the team is like we have people who are kind of new to fighting games, and which is great because then we can get their feedback and know the answer to that question, and they love Ekko. We did have to make some adjustments. Like I do remember, common thing to do when you're playing fighting games for the first time or you're new to it, right? You're going to mash. and mashing S2 would get you this like weird, like you'd start to do an S2, it would rewind before it's active.
Yeah.
And I remember you made a tweak though to make that more difficult. Like the timing now, if you want to actually get that, is pretty tight. So it's actually
you can't buffer the rewind.
right. Yeah, it would buffer. It no longer does.
Yeah.
But it's still possible. It's just kind of tight. So it's a fun little skill check, and that skill check does come in handy,
So
right? You can
hard.
bait parries and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's for.
Yeah, but like then if you're a new player who's just mashing, you'll still get like LMHS2, right? You'll get the thing you expect.
Right. Exactly.
So there were some challenges, but I think overall the feedback was like, I'm new, I'm playing Ekko, and I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and actually I want to say that as like a recommendation to folks. One of the things we discovered with Ekko that's kind of funny is he actually, by the nature of his kit, he looks more complicated than he is. Because we knew he's a really appealing character. We wanted people to be able to play him of all skill levels. And so we designed him so that he has really simple stuff he can do that just works. If you sit down and actually try Ekko and focus on the core stuff, you're going to have a good time as a new player. But we admit, we realized in retrospect, okay, it looks pretty complicated, right? And like, we thought, some of this stuff was clearly meant to be the optional advanced stuff, right? Like the install. We're like, okay, the install is sort of the do not shred here for new players. We get that, right? Like, really wanted to be able to do stuff like this. Oh, so I missed the S1 there because the timing is so hard. But right, you kind of get this pattern. Wow. So basically, the install should, just give you a lot of flexibility, a lot of freedom, but players who don't want to engage with it don't have to. The point is when you see this, everybody has to engage with this. And so they think, oh, it's going to be super complicated, but it's not. You hit the button again, you can get mixed, you can get rewind. It's kind of the simplest thing, and it kind of smooths out over time. You just improve your skills as you go. So give it a try, and we'll keep that in mind as we move through future champions.
One of the things that I really love about Ekko is we're on the pulse fuse right here. One of the coolest things is when you're in the pulse fuse, here, I'll demonstrate for you. This is, when you go with lights, switch to mediums, then you can pick it up again with light into the medium. And that was when I first got my hands on this and I started understanding how to build out all of Ekko's strings. And it's like, I love that I'm able to get into the game and be competitive with my friends and learn how these combos are rooting, but also all of the combos that you were getting into, I feel like there's always something more to learn. And that excites me so much every time I log into the game. And I hope that when people get their hands on the game, they feel that excitement just as much. And they want to come back and keep learning more, too.
Yeah, I hope so. Creativity is just such a big part of what makes fighting games fun and player expression. We just want to give people enough to feel like they can make their character their own. And yeah, I hope they can enjoy that.
Cool. So, all right, guys, we're in our last 5 minutes. So, I know time flies when you're on the stream. I'm going to quickly say, hey, chat, if you have any questions, throw it in now. I'm going to pass along to you two to give just your last words to everybody. We're going to see if there's any really cool questions in chat, and then we're going to end it for the day. So, I'm going to pass it over to you, Alex. Anything about what Ekko means to you and what designing his character has been like?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think Ekko, from my perspective, work I've done, it's probably the work that I'm most proud of in my entire career, and just that I feel the most love and passion for. He's just on every level, he's so cool because it's having that kind of degree of big brain opportunity with a character who feels so just cool and stylish and easygoing. It's a really nice combination where you end up, I don't know, I think it's really easy for people to jump into and feel aspirational. So I feel super grateful that I got to work on him and keep working on him with you and such a huge, talented team. Part of me still dreams of the white whale that we never got. We considered a different ult for Ekko, and there were many reasons why it didn't make sense, both from a technical and gameplay standpoint. But it was fun to meme about for a long time, this idea of oh, what if Ekko could actually roll back, right? What if his ult you pause the game and just roll it backwards and just walk around the screen with everything paused, get to where you want, and restart it. And we realized it would actually be really degenerate in a lot of ways from a gameplay standpoint. Incredibly complicated to build, but we always had it in the back of our heads, oh man, think about that ridiculous version of Ekko. Probably not something we'd want in the actual game, but maybe some wild version of it in the future.
Yeah, I still definitely dream of that moment where I can set up a mix, right? My opponent blocks it. I'm like, well, okay, I'll just try again.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about you?
Man, it's hard not to just say exactly what you said, but
Oh, sorry.
no, it's great. I feel immensely privileged to have had a chance to do this. this is my job and it's sick, and I got to work and build, Ekko, a character that like really resonates with the kind of stuff I like to do as a player. I don't know what else I could ask for. This was just awesome, and I got to work with you and everyone else on the team who did this. Our team's super talented, and I don't know what else to say about it. It was sick. It was fun, and
this is great.
Yeah.
This is great. So there's been some questions in chat. People want to know more about Alpha Lab. We are going to have an article that will come out and tell you about everything that's going to be in Alpha Lab. And in the days leading up to Alpha Lab, we will send out emails to let people know. I believe it will be on the day of Alpha Lab. Don't quote me, but I think on the day of Alpha Lab, you'll receive the email letting you know if you've been accepted to Alpha Lab or not. Along with that too, we're scheduled to come out in 2025, but please go ahead, sign up to Alpha Lab. It has been absolutely amazing to be able to bring the dev team out here on stage and talk to all of you guys, the players, talk to everyone here in our booth. It has been such an honor. From the entire 2XKO dev team, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. 2XKO at EVO, signing out for the last time. We'll hear from you soon at Alpha Lab. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.